They didn't just add liquidity today, they hit the banking system with an emergency fire hose, right as China yanked a mountain of real silver out of the vaults. Same morning, same urgency. And if you think that's normal, you're reading the wrong story. Here's what happened. Before most of us even finished our first coffee, the U.S. Central Bank pushed roughly $3 billion into overnight plumbing to keep funding from choking. At the same time, Shanghai reported a massive physical withdrawal, about 41 tons of silver metal leaving the exchange, not just paper changing hands. 2 moves, 2 sides of the world, 1 message. The paper market is straining while the physical market is tightening. Now watch the timing, because timing is where the truth leaks out. We are sitting on December 30th, 2025, 48 hours from January 1st. That date matters because China's new export restrictions are about to slam the door on easy flows. And markets don't panic on the headline. They panic before the headline when the people closest to the metal start acting like it's disappearing. So ask yourself, if nothing is wrong, why do they need emergency cash at 8:15 in the morning? And if supply is fine, why does someone grab 41 tons like the shelves are about to go bare? This is not a chart day, this is a plumbing day. And plumbing days are where systems break. We've been trained to stare at candles, green, red, RSI, moving averages, pretty lights. But silver isn't a stock ticker. Silver is atoms. It's conductivity. It's the stuff you can't print, you can't fake, and you can't settle with an apology. And right now, we're watching the world split into 2 markets. One market is New York, derivatives, high-frequency churn, contracts that promise delivery but rarely deliver. The other market is Shanghai, factories, procurement officers, strategic stockpiles, and trucks that move actual bars. When those 2 worlds stay aligned, the system feels stable. When they drift apart, you get stress. When they rip apart, you get a squeeze that doesn't show up politely. Let's talk about the $3 billion first, because people will try to wave it away like it's routine, and it wasn't. In a calm system, banks lend to each other overnight without drama. Repo is boring. Boring is good. Boring means trust. Today wasn't boring. A sudden injection like this tells us somebody needed cash immediately, and the private market either couldn't provide it or didn't want to. That's the part that matters. When your friends stop lending you money, it's not because they forgot your birthday. It's because they're worried about getting paid back. So what forces a big player to scramble for cash before the bell? Margin, collateral, risk models screaming, the kind of wire it now demand that hits when volatility rises and positions go sideways. And silver is the perfect place for that kind of panic because it's the most manipulated, most leveraged small market on the planet. Small enough to bully with paper. Important enough to matter when the real world demands it. Now here's the uncomfortable logic. If a major desk is short and the market starts sniffing a physical pinch, the first thing that happens is collateral pressure. The exchange asks for more margin. The clearinghouse asks for more cash. Your prime broker wants to know if you can pay. That's when you see liquidity support. Not because the system is strong, because the system is trying not to cough up blood. And then Shanghai, 41 tons. That's not a cute number. That's not retail stacking. That's industrial appetite or state-level planning. That's pallets, forklifts, trucks, manifests, and security. If you've never held a single 1,000-ounce bar, you don't feel the weight of this. A 1,000-ounce bar is dense, brutal, real. Now multiply that by thousands of bars. That's what 41 tons means. That's an operation. And people don't run an operation like that because they feel relaxed. They do it when the calendar is closing, when rules are changing, and when they want metal in their possession, not a claim on someone else's balance sheet. So the question becomes, who is moving first? The printers or the hoarders? Because that answer tells you who's afraid. The West reaches for liquidity, the East reaches for inventory. One side fights with digits, the other fights with gravity. And gravity doesn't care about speeches, press conferences, or transitory anything. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the paper market can hide stress, till it can't. On days like today, the paper volume goes vertical. You'll see hundreds of thousands of futures contracts trade, which represents an absurd amount of silver on paper, sometimes more than annual mine supply, traded in a single session like it's a video game. But delivery? Delivery is the tell. And there's a detail most people ignore because it sounds boring, until it turns lethal. Warehouses don't just hold inventory. They hold categories. Some metal is simply stored there, owned by someone who has zero reason to sell. Other metal is tagged as deliverable, ready to be handed over when a contract holder shows up. That distinction is the difference between calm and chaos. Think of it like a parking lot. Eligible metal is cars in private garages. They exist, but you can't grab the keys. Registered metal is cars on a rental lot with keys ready. That's what the system counts on. When registered shrinks, the market can still act normal. Oh, until someone actually needs a car. Then the lot is empty, and the price becomes whatever you'll pay to not miss the flight. Now connect that to today. If Asia is pulling bars, the first pool that dries up is the metal that was supposed to be available on demand. And when that happens, paper sellers don't stop selling. They sell harder. They dump more contracts to paint fake supply, hoping fear does the rest. But fear isn't the only emotion in markets. Urgency is stronger. Urgency is a manufacturer saying, I don't care what spot is, I need metal by Friday or my line stops. Whoa, that's why premiums matter more than charts. Premiums are the lie detector. If spot drops and premiums rise, that's not bearish, that's stress. If spot rises and premiums rise, that's not hype, that's shortage. So here's what we watch next. Frictions. Do delivery times stretch? Do wholesalers ration? Do refiners quote next week like a warning? When the cost to borrow metal jumps, that's the rent going up because the metal is hard to find. And December 30th is screaming hard to find because January 1st isn't just a policy date, it's a psychological gunshot. It tells buyers, if you wait, you might not get filled. And when buyers believe that, they stop negotiating and start grabbing. So here's the open loop. When paper settlement stops feeling acceptable, what happens first? Do exchanges push cash instead of bars? Does the rulebook suddenly matter more than the contract? Or does someone refuse the cash and demand the atoms? That's why the next move could be violent. And if that sounds dramatic, remember, every shortage starts as a whisper in logistics before it becomes a scream on price screens everywhere overnight. And the day physical starts winning consistently is the day paper has a problem no printer can fix. Let's pause on the China angle because people keep misunderstanding it. This isn't about China being nice or being mean. This is about self-interest. China is one of the world's biggest consumers of silver through solar, electronics, industrial manufacturing, things that don't stop because New York feels nervous. If export restrictions tighten, if licensing slows, if flows get sticky, the rational move is to secure supply early. You buy ahead, you hoard ahead. You treat the metal like an input that you cannot afford to miss. And when big buyers hoard, they don't announce it. They just remove inventory. That's what a vacuum looks like. Quiet, efficient, brutal. Meanwhile, the paper side reacts the only way it knows how. More contracts, more leverage, more supply manufactured out of keystrokes to keep the visible price calm. It's like trying to stop a rising flood by repainting the waterline on the wall. Looks good, doesn't change reality. Now we need to be honest about something. None of this is a guarantee that price goes up tomorrow. Markets can do stupid things longer than we expect. And this is educational. We manage risk. But the direction of stress is visible. And if stress is rising while physical leaves the system, we know where the pressure builds. Here's the mistake most people make. They treat silver like a normal asset. It's not. Silver sits at the intersection of money, industry, and geopolitics. That intersection creates fragile plumbing. Gold can be hoarded quietly and still function. Silver gets consumed. When you remove silver, you don't just affect investors, you affect factories. That's why silver squeezes can turn from market story to policy story fast. So what happens when policy meets shortage? This is where the chessboard shows up. If governments have green energy targets, defense needs, and industrial mandates, they don't shrug when inputs get scarce. They intervene, they allocate, they subsidize, they pressure, they sometimes restrict. They make the market less free. Now imagine this scenario. Physical premiums stay elevated. Export restrictions tighten. Western inventories don't rebuild, and the paper market keeps printing claims. At some point, a large buyer decides they don't want paper. They stand. They demand delivery. And that's when everything changes. Because the paper market can survive infinite speculation as long as delivery stays low. The moment delivery rises, the game becomes about inventory, and inventory is finite. So the real question for the next 48 hours is not, will price wiggle? The question is, will physical stay tight enough that someone forces the issue? Because if someone forces the issue, volatility won't look like a normal day. People hear $3 billion injection and assume it's about the economy. No, that's the wrong frame. This is about counterparty chains. A big derivatives market is not a bunch of independent bets. It's a web. One desk is someone else's hedge. One clearing member is someone else's lifeline. If one big node fails, the stress ripples. So when you see emergency liquidity, you're watching the referee keep the game from ending mid-play because the stadium lights are about to go out. And yes, they can keep the lights on, but they can't conjure extra metal. So the paper side can patch liquidity. The physical side can starve supply. And those are not symmetrical powers. If you are short paper silver, you can cover with cash until cash isn't enough because the other side wants metal. If you're long physical silver, your asset has no counterparty. It just sits there indifferent while humans panic around it. That's why physical markets eventually dominate when trust breaks. So let's connect the dots. Emergency repo support suggests stress in funding and collateral demand. Mass physical withdrawal suggests tightening supply and rising urgency among real buyers. Put that together, and what do we get? A market preparing for impact. Now here's the part the mainstream won't say out loud. The paper price is not the price. It's a reference point for a leveraged promise. The real price is what the next buyer pays to get actual metal when actual metal is scarce. And scarcity doesn't show up first on a chart. It shows up in premiums. It shows up in delivery delays. It shows up in out-of-stock banners. It shows up in industrial procurement teams signing long-term contracts and taking anything not nailed down. So what should we do with this? We don't gamble. We measure. We watch the signals that matter. Physical withdrawals, inventory trends, premiums, funding stress, exchange rule changes. And we stay allergic to noise, because the noise is how they shake people out. Here's what I expect to see in the next 2 days. One more attempt to push the paper price around. One more volatility spike designed to make you emotional. Because emotion is a weapon. They want you to feel late. They want you to feel stupid. They want you to sell the metal you own because the screen flashes red for 15 minutes. Don't play that game. If physical is leaving the vaults, then the screen is the theater and the vault is the stage. Now, we need to talk about the export ban window like adults. When a major economy tightens export rules, 3 things happen. First, the just-in-time supply chain turns into just-in-case stockpiling. Second, traders try to front-run the policy by securing supply before the door closes. Third, arbitrage becomes harder, spreads widen, and paper markets lose their ability to pretend everything is smooth. That's exactly the pattern today fits. So where's the trap? The trap is thinking this must resolve politely. It won't. These stories end in one of 2 ways. Either physical supply loosens and premiums collapse, meaning today was a scare and the system stabilizes. Or physical stays tight and premiums widen, meaning paper is pricing a fantasy while reality moves elsewhere. Which path looks more likely when 41 tons walk out the door in one morning? Now, don't miss the psychology here. They'll try to confuse you with narratives. They'll say, oh, the Fed injection proves stability. No, it proves intervention. They'll say, oh, China is hiking margins to cool speculation. Maybe. Or maybe they're choking leverage because they're protecting the exchange from a delivery storm. They'll say, oh, the volume shows liquidity. Volume shows activity. It doesn't show truth. Truth is inventory. Truth is delivery. Truth is what happens when someone says, hand me the bar. Now let's take this to the personal level, because this is where people either win or get wrecked. If your silver exposure is an ETF share, you are exposed to a chain of promises. Custodians, authorized participants, sub-custodians, leasing, swaps. It works until it doesn't. If your silver is allocated and deliverable, you have more control. If it's in your possession, you have the maximum control. That's not ideology, that's mechanics. In a stress event, claims get questioned, access gets restricted, withdrawals get delayed, the fine print becomes very loud. And we are exactly in the kind of environment where fine print comes alive. Now, I'm not telling anyone what to buy. We each manage risk, but I'm telling you what to watch, the spread and the vault. Because when the spread stays wide and the vault keeps draining, it's not a maybe, it's a trend. And trends are how we position calmly, rationally, without drama. So here's your next clue. Watch what happens when Asia opens, and the rest of the world tries to reconcile a paper price with a physical shortage. If the spread persists, arbitrage pressure increases. If arbitrage pressure increases, paper shorts feel heat. If paper shorts feel heat, collateral demands rise. And if collateral demands rise, you'll see more liquidity support pop up like weeds. This is the loop. And loops end when one side breaks. So which side is more likely to break? The side made of promises or the side made of metal? That's the whole story. Now, before we go, I want you to do one thing. Don't just watch this. Participate. Where do you think the real stress shows first? On the price chart or on the delivery list? And if we're wrong, where would it show up first? Drop your answer in the comments, because the community learns faster when we compare notes. And if you want us tracking this in real time, hit subscribe. Short, simple, because the next 48 hours won't be quiet. The printer fired today. The vault emptied today. And when the calendar flips, we find out who was bluffing.